Okay, well, hi everyone. Welcome to another one of my English classes. I am your teacher, Ruler15, and today we are going to learn about contractions. So, contractions. Now, what exactly are contractions? Contractions are, well, actually, let's let someone, in the chat, in the voice channel answer this question. What are contractions?
Be
Hmm?
Contract contractuals is like I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much that. So, um, to speak in more general terms, a contraction is essentially a combination of two words in English. So, for example, you could say, as someone else, let's use someone's example right now. So, I am becomes I'm. So, this is essentially what a contraction is. You're just combining two words in a sense to where you
well,
have some letters from one word and some letters from another word, and then you have an apostrophe. So that's what a contraction is, and we use contractions in daily speech to shorten our sentences because, like, for example, instead of saying instead of saying I cannot go to the movies, we can just simply say I can't go to the movies. So with that, we saved ourselves one syllable. So we use contractions to, shorten our words and help us speak a bit faster. And in casual speech, you will come across contractions a lot. Like they're just unavoidable. You will come across them all the time. So if you're learning English, it's in your best interest to learn contractions because if you don't use contractions in when it comes to casual speech, you will sound stilted and foreign, and you don't want that. So it's important that you learn contractions because the more contractions you use, the more native you'll sound, provided that you use them correctly. Okay, so before I continue, does anyone have any questions so far?
nope.
Okay, cool. Now let's talk about types of contractions. So I have a little chart here. It's a really handy chart. Okay, so we're going to talk about contractions for the following verbs.
What was that?
Huh?
Why everyone's voice is house?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're asking. Okay, okay, so let's go ahead and go to this. Oh, and of course, thank you, Chlorophyll, for moderating this. Um, let's see. Okay, so we're going to talk about groups of contractions for the following verbs. We're not going to cover every single possible contraction, but we're going to cover as many as we can. Oh, yeah, that is actually a good question, Ice. I wonder, is it possible for me to do that? Because, yeah, those notification sounds are pretty annoying. Let's see if I can fix that really fast. Maybe I can. Probably not. I don't know how to do that. Huh. I don't know. Not sure it's... I don't know. Yeah, so probably only a mod or admin could. Okay,
Ouch.
Well, that's okay. Like, I mean, I don't think very many people are going to join after this point anyway. Okay, so I'm going to talk about groups of contractions for these following verbs: be, will, would, have, and had. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the verb to be. So let's talk about the contractions for the verb to be. You know, like am, is, are, was, were. So let's go ahead and do that. So, let's talk about I, you, he, she, it, we, you, and they. Or you all. Like, you and you all are essentially the same. So let's find out how we're going to combine these pronouns that I just typed with verbs to be, such as am, is, are, was, and were. So for I, you have to combine it with am. Remember, and we conjugate the verb to be in English, just like with many other languages. So in this case, it would be I am. And to turn that into a contraction, it becomes I'm, as I said earlier. So I am becomes I'm. For you, it'd be you are, and we would combine that with just like that. So you are becomes your. Okay, so and he, she, and its can be combined with is. Can anyone tell me what you would get if you combine he, she, and it with is? So you'd have three different contractions. Yeah, he's is the first one. That's good. So what would she and it be? She's and its. Yes, very good, very good. Yes. So let's see. Now let's see. What about we and are? What would that give you? Where? Yeah, you guys are so good at this. And I'm not going to cover you all because, it's the same thing. But we wouldn't say, like, that. You would just say you all are, or just you are, or your. But, again, it's the same thing as the other one. So, now, what would they and are be? There, yeah, of course, there. So they and are is there. Yeah, you guys got it. Okay, so that's how you would do it for the verb to be. And now, before we continue, I should cover some important. Yeah, exactly what Ice is talking about. We're going to cover that in a moment. So, let me go back to the list that I put in. So we have I'm. Oh, well, first let me do this. It's actually not that crowded. I had like 50 people last time. Anyway, so we had I'm, your, he's, she's, its, we're, and there. So we have all of those. Okay, so let's talk about the confusing ones here. So we have your and your. Let's talk about your and your. So your is not the same as your. Let's get that out of the way. These two are not the same. People confuse these. Both natives and non-natives confuse. Well, it's really more with natives, but still. A lot of people confuse your and your. These are two very different words. They sound the same, exactly the same, but they are very different words. Your, remember, your means you are. Your means you are, whereas your is and your is just possession of something. So it's ownership of something. It expresses ownership. Well, as someone just posted a good example, it's like know your shit versus know you are shit. No, those two are not the same thing. Because if you say know your shit, but you mean to say you typed your instead of with the apostrophe instead of the other one, well, you kind of just insulted yourself. So don't do that. But anyway, your and your are not the same thing. So, yeah, your is you had that thing. Now, this happens more. Natives mix this up more than non-natives do, which makes sense because non-natives tend to, learn all the grammar rules and stuff like that, and they tend to, and they do a lot of reading and all that stuff and writing and all that stuff. So of course they're not going to mess up as often as natives do because a lot of natives mess this up, and it really comes down to not reading a lot. Because people who read a lot wouldn't make this mistake, but yeah, a lot of people don't really read that much, so they tend to mix up the two. They just type what they hear, because English is just a messy language when it comes to pronunciation. It just is, unfortunately. Let's see. Now, see, what context usually makes it clear as to what you should use. But there are times where that can be ambiguous, where it can still be ambiguous, and I'll cover those in a moment. But just know that here I should probably type up an example. So yeah, the difference between your and your, when you know your shit and when you know your shit. Yeah, you don't want to mix those two up. But anyway, your is okay. So I'm trying to think of these. Okay. So essentially, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay. Okay. So, knowing this, what I just talked about, which of these two sentences is correct? I think that you're sick, or I think that you're sick. Which is correct? Number one, yes. Yes, of course. See, you guys get it. You're so smart. See, number one. Okay, now let me do another one. Okay, now let's try this example. And again, it's just as easy as the first. So, which is correct here? I think that this is your bag, or I think that this is your bag. Yep, or you could just say your, whatever. But yeah, as you guys can see, it's number one. So see, you guys are getting it. Okay, but yeah, make sure that you don't mix up your and your. It leaves a bad impression on you if you do that. So don't do that. Like, people will think that you don't read a lot if you mix those two up. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Going back to what else? Okay, so there's I'm, your, he's, she's, and it's. Okay, let's talk about it's. It's. So, it's not the same thing as it's. It's a similar issue with your and your. It's is not the same thing as it's. So, remember, it's means it is, and it's is possession, just like before with your and your. So don't mix those two up. This one's a bit more understandable to make a mistake in because they have the same number of letters, unlike the other one I just talked about, your and your, but the only difference is an apostrophe. So this one I'm more understanding of. But again, these two are not the same, so make sure you get that right. So its is it is, and its is possession of something. Well, it would be it's my dog, as in it is my dog. So to remember that, remember to use sorry, I'm stuttering here. So in order for you to remember which one you should use, it means it is. So if you're ever confused, just say put in it is and see if it makes sense. If it makes sense, it should be it with an apostrophe. If not, it should be its. So, and it's the same thing with your and your. Remember, so if you can't tell the difference, just put in you are and see if it makes sense. If it doesn't, then you should just take out the your with an apostrophe and use the your without an apostrophe. So, for example, I mean, no, they're pronounced the same. Its and its are pronounced the same. There's no difference between the two in terms of pronunciation. But let's see. No, in this case it wouldn't depend at all because you're using two determiners for one noun. Its and my. You can't really put both of them together like that. You could say its dog or my dog, but not it's my dog. It like if you have its without the apostrophe. And yeah, that's a good use. The pencil lost its point without the apostrophe. So okay, so let me just provide an example. Okay, so just to see how much you guys understand, which sentence here is correct? Yep, you guys got it. It's number 1. Because remember, as I said, you can't have two possessives together like that. So the first one is the only one that makes sense. Okay, let's see. What else was I going to... Oh, right, let me put in another example. Okay, yeah, let me use this example. Okay. So, which sentence is correct here? Yeah, number 2. Yeah, exactly. You guys got it. Number 2. The machine is missing its screen because the screen belongs to the machine. So the first one doesn't make any sense. Only the second one makes sense. Make sure I'm still... Okay, good. I'm still recording. Okay, so that's that. So that's the difference between its and its. Now, let me go back, because there's one more I want to talk about. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so there. Let's talk about there. And this one is a doozy because we have 3 theirs in English. So we have there, and even there. I think that some people might pronounce these a bit differently, but I think most people pronounce them the same. But I don't know. Like, but anyway, just know that that many people pronounce these 3 words the exact same. But again, they're all different things. So, there refers to, well, it means they are. And yeah, Tara, see, Tara, you got this. You're right. Exactly. They are position and possession. So, let me just go ahead and type what I was going to type. So, there refers to the position, and there refers to, as Tara said, possession. Okay. So now, again, this is also one that natives mess up. Because, again, a lot of these words sound the same. But don't worry, there is a way to tell the difference. So let me go ahead and type up an example. So remember that there's possession for it's the possessive form of they. Okay, so let me go ahead. So which sentence is correct? Yep, one. Exactly, one. Because remember, if you put in if you put in they are, then the sentence will make sense. So if you ever get stuck telling the difference between there, and there, just put in they are. If it makes sense, you have there. If not, you have the other two, but I'll go into the difference between the other two in a moment. And yeah, see, I love he got it. He's got it right there. That's how you would tell the difference between the two. Okay, now let me type up another example. One where, yeah, let me just type up another example. And remember, to see if the sentence makes sense, put in they are. And if it does, you have there. If not, you have to deal with the other two. But again, I'll explain the other two in more depth in a moment. Oh, yeah, see, I didn't notice that. That's actually a good point, the mechanic. Yeah, that's a good point. It really would be they have a big house. But you could say they're having a big house party. You could say that, and that would make sense. I didn't even read that very carefully, but yeah, that's a good point. Because that would not sound right in English. But if you want to say they're having a big house party, something like that, then that would make sense. Okay, so see, that's why you're green. That's why you're green. Okay, so which sentence is correct? Remember, one is about position, one is about possession, and one just means they are. Okay. See, like your sentence here, they're having a big house. It's not. I wouldn't say it's exactly wrong. It's just not something you'd say. Because you're saying that they have a big. If you're saying that they own a house, then it wouldn't make sense to use the progressive there, unless you mean something else. Okay, so going back to what I was talking about. Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I'm not gonna say that it's exactly like just wrong, but it's not something that you'd hear. That's not something that you'd hear. Like we don't use the progressive like that. And normally you should use the progressive in contexts that aren't habitual in the present. Okay, okay, so let's talk about the difference between there and there. Yeah, it's like I'm not trying to criticize what you wrote. It's just that, when it comes to it's better to just sound natural, because you can sound correct, but still sound completely foreign, and people would be like, that doesn't sound good. So, yeah. But anyway, there and there. Let's talk about these two. So remember, there, as someone else said earlier, there refers to a location. Oops. So, I'm going there. Let me say there. There are the keys. Or let's see, no, let me use something else. Yeah. There are 3 books on the table. So, we use there for location. Like to tell where something is. And there is possessive. So, it means that something belongs to a group of people. So, this is their house. Or, their dog is at the vet's, as in like the veterinarian's office, or clinic, I should say. Like, that's another example. Their dog is at the vet. So, here we have house and dog belonging to more than one person. They. Whose house is it? It is theirs. This is their house. And their dog is at the vet. Okay, so... yeah, you could think of it like that. Here is like this place, there is like that place. That's how I would think of it. Yeah, it's really just a matter of distance. I guess for things close to you, you'd use here. For things further away from you, or farther away. I always mix up further and farther. I think it's farther in this case. Farther away from you, you'd use... for things that are farther away from you, you'd use there. So, but whatever. Anyway, that's the difference between there, there, and there. Okay, let me do one more example, just to make sure you guys got what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay. So we're going to do that. Okay, so out of these 3 sentences, which sentence is correct? See, you guys are so good at this. Yep, it is number 1. Number 1, yes. Because again, we're talking about location. Where was the postman? The postman was there. The other 2 don't make any sense. Okay, that's okay. Actually, I don't mind answering that now. Everybody and everyone, they're like the same. It doesn't matter which one you use. They're the same. They're the same. See what I did there? I used there. But anyway, they're the same. Yeah, they're the same. So it doesn't matter which one you use. I can't think of any semantic difference between the two. There's some people might prefer one or the other, but it really doesn't matter which one you use. Okay. Anyway, let's go ahead and go back to what we were talking about. But I appreciate the courtesy because we're talking about contractions right now. But and this time I don't actually mind answering that question. It's not a bad question to ask, but whatever. But anyway. Uh, okay, so we talked about the contractions for the B group. Actually, no. Let me cover. There are 6 more I want to cover. I'm looking at the chart right now. And I'll post a chart sometime later in the lesson. So let's... Oh, but before I continue, I should stop and let people ask questions. So does anyone have any questions for me so far?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah?
Can we use these constructions when we are writing formal or when we are taking an exam?
Okay, that's actually a very good point. That's something I wanted to talk about. So, in formal writing, do not use contractions. Ever. Just don't use them. Because because formal writing it's not casual writing. These aren't casual matters. You can't be too casual when it comes to formal writing. So we don't use contractions. Not in academic essays, not in technical reports. No, you just don't use contractions. But anywhere else, yeah. Any other time is fine.
Thank you.
So let me go ahead and type this for the record. In formal writing, do not use contractions. Do not use contractions. Okay. But, in casual speech, it's fine and even necessary if you want to sound native. Okay. So does anyone have any other questions so far? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and go on to the next part. Okay, so okay, so well, I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry, you just phrased your sentence weird. You're saying it's possible contractions don't... I'm not sure what you're trying to say there. Oh, I see what you did there, the mechanic. Yeah, see, you used all 3 words so flawlessly. Okay, before we go to the next group of verbs, let me cover who, what, where, when, and why. Oh, and how. And you can combine these with with is and are. Let's see. Or actually, yeah, you can do that actually. Yeah. So you can combine these with is and are. So for who, you get whose and whoer. But the second one is not commonly used, so just keep that in mind. And what can become what's and whatter, which again, the combinations with are not commonly used, so just again keep that in mind. But I personally don't use them, but there are people who do. Where becomes where's and where are. let's see, when becomes whens and whenner, and then why becomes wise and wire, and then how becomes house and hower, and then that's how you do that. That's not that that's a different question, because what you're talking about is do support, and that's a different topic. But I probably should. I might actually cover that briefly here, since we're talking about contractions anyway. So yeah, so that's actually not a bad question. I'll cover that later, but for now, let me just go back to what I was talking about. Where is unpronounced? It seems unpronounceable. So see, the combinations with R are just not really common, but you do hear them. Whom? Okay, so no, whom. You can't. We don't use contractions with objective pronouns. So we don't do it like that. It just with subjective pronouns. I, he, she, we, but not with whom, his. I mean him, her. We don't do that. Okay. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go to the next part. And it's pretty easy, because now we get to combine all these pronouns with will. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, go ahead.
So I've heard sometimes native speakers contract what does like what is. So for example, what's he look like? Is this a common, I don't know, contraction in speech?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a good question. Okay, so what the mechanic is talking about is, okay, so he's talking about what's. So I forgot to mention this, because again, it's not something I commonly use, but what's can refer to what is or what does. So, for example, you could say, like if somebody's asking you, like, what's the machine do? Which is short for what does the machine do? So, what's can be what is or what does. But what does is, using what's like that for what does is not common. I mean, you do hear it, but it's not as common as using what's for what is. So, you'll hear what is more often than what does when you're referring to what's. But that is actually a good question. Now, those contractions, I'm gonna, shoulda, we're gonna cover those later. But right now, I want to cover the standard contractions. The contractions in standard English. But that, again, that's actually not a bad question. I mean, either is grammatically correct, but the first one is much more common than the second one. Okay, okay, now let's cover will. So, with will, So will can be combined with the previously mentioned, with any of the previously mentioned pronouns. Oops. So I will becomes I'll, and you will becomes you'll. So what would he will be? Can anyone tell me that? Yeah, very good. Okay, and what about she? Well, no. He'll and hell are pronounced differently. Like, he's and his are also pronounced differently. Don't mix those two up. Like, different vowels. And I know that it's tricky because English has quite a number of vowels, compared to, say, Spanish, which has short vowels. English has short and long vowels, so that causes problems for people whose languages have fewer vowels than, English does. That can cause problems, but yeah, they're different. That's actually a good question. I don't think. No, I'm not sure about that. Actually, that's a good question. I think he'll just refers to he will. I'm not sure if it refers to he shall too. I think it refers just to he will. I'm not 100% sure though, because I'm an American and we don't use shall very much, so I'm not completely sure, but I think I'm 90% sure that he'll refers only to he will. Okay. But yeah, like in American English, we use will much more often than shall. We don't really use shall, like we rarely use it. But yeah. But that's not a bad question to ask. Okay, now what about she will? What would that one be? She'll, yes. Yes, very good, yes. That's correct. Now what about this one? It will. Yes, very good. You're all good at this. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and type up the rest because... Oh, did I miss a pronoun? Oh, I did miss a pronoun. Oops. Okay. I forgot to cover that. I forgot to cover this. That's... is... That is... I forgot to cover that earlier. I meant to cover that, but I forgot to. Okay. But anyway, let me go ahead and type the rest for will. So, they'll, that'll, who will, when'll. Did I cover will? Wheel? No, I didn't. Okay. Let me put that at the front. Okay. So that's and I think there's one more. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So those are the ones for the rest. Like for will, these are the rest of the contractions. Will, they'll, that'll, who'll, what'll, when'll, where'll, why'll, how'll. Yeah, they're a mess to pronounce, but that's how you would say them. Okay. And I'm sorry if my mic doesn't sound very good because I tried to use my other mic, my headset mic, but the sound just was terrible. It just kept beeping and stuff. So I was told to I was told earlier to update my drivers, but I haven't gotten to doing that. I completely forgot. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, but just bear with me for now. I'll try to get that issue fixed later. Okay. Someone asked a good question. I think is non-standard? Yes, because I can't really think of a situation where anyone would say that because this is just sounds like this is. So no, I don't think that's standard. Okay. Let's do have. Let's do have, yeah. So now let's talk about have. So, okay, so let me do the first example. I have becomes I've. Yeah, I've, exactly. So really, you're just adding an apostrophe VE to a lot, not all of these, because with have you have to conjugate according to person. So some people will have has and some will have. So, but let me go in order. So you have would be you've. What would this one be? Let me give you guys a tricky one. What would this one be? He has. Yep, that's it. He's, exactly. And you'll notice that it's the same form as the other one. So, he has, and what I mean by this is that he's refers to both he is and he has. So you can see that this contraction is mapped to two different groups of words. So how do you tell the difference? Well, you just tell from the context. The context usually makes it clear. So, for example, if you're going to say, like you could say, he's in his room versus let me provide these two examples, and they're both grammatically correct. Okay, so we have these two examples. He's in his room and he's gone home. The first one is very clearly he is because, well, he has wouldn't make any sense. We're talking about like what his location is. And number two is he has because we're using has as, part of the present perfect here. He has gone home. Yeah, exactly. Has gone is the present perfect. He's in his room. He's gone home. He is in his room. He has gone home. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. So don't mix those two up. Because, again, context will usually make it clear on which one you need to use. Is there a difference between he's eating and he's eaten? Other than the tense or aspect, however you want to phrase it, or both, really. There's a difference. Because he's eating means he is eating. He's eaten means he has eaten. So, let me type that down so that you guys know. he's eating is he is eating. He's eaten is, ooh, my bad. He has. Well, it's present perfect, not perfect continuous. But you're close. But you could say he's been eating, and that would be present perfect continuous. But yeah, here's the difference. He's eating, he is eating. He's eaten, he has eaten. Again, both very different. Okay. Yes?
I don't know why, but I badly. I don't know if it's a problem with my headphones or is
What's wrong?
something with your. Yeah, I'm gonna leave the call and rejoin. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm lagging? How on... Oh, him, not you. Okay. Yeah, he was lagging for a bit. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Alright, let's go ahead. Yeah, I was like, oh no, I hope I'm not lagging. Okay, let's keep going. So, she's becomes... I just said the answer. I'm stupid. Okay, well anyway. What would she has become? Yeah, she's. Okay. And it has would be what? What would it has be? And again, you notice that, yeah, it's it. And you notice that it's the same thing with he's. So it's could be it. Oops. It has. I need to work on my typing skills. It has and it is. So it's could refer to either one. But again, you use the context to tell you which one to use. And it's the same thing with he's. So I'm not really going to cover this. Okay. Continuous progressive. Which one is used more? Are you talking about the term, or are you talking about... Are you trying to imply that they're different? I don't know. But since we're talking about contractions here, just DM me about like that question, because that's not related to this discussion. I mean, although to be fair to you, like we were talking about he's examples like he's eating and he's eaten, but just But anyway, let's see. But yeah, as someone else said, referring to the ping I got, but he's eaten and he ate, yeah. As someone else said, it'd be present perfect and past simple. Okay. Let's see. So far, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes?
So these contractions are generally used with determiners and personal pronouns, right? But I've come across quite often these contractions, especially has and is, used with proper nouns. So, for example, Maria's been doing this for hours, or John's the tallest in the class. So, are these contractions with proper nouns common?
Oh, yes, another good question. Okay, so what he's talking about is combining the pronoun, I'm sorry, yeah, the names, proper nouns, with the verb is. So, oops. So, for example, we have Maria plus is would give you, or here, let me do it the other way around. So Maria's could be either Maria is, sorry, or Maria has. Why can't I type today? Okay, so yeah, you can make contractions out of proper nouns. That's what he's asking. And yeah, it's common to do so. So you would say something like, oh, John's gone crazy, or Maria's here, or stuff like that. It's common to use contractions like that. Or you could even do it with common nouns. So you could say, the company's gone bankrupt. So you could say it like this. You could say that. The company's gone bankrupt. And, you know, again, another contraction, but this time with a common noun instead of a proper noun. Or you could say, the cat's been, let's see, the cat's been feeling sad. And that, you could do that too. Again, another common noun, but this time you have a contraction. So you could do it. So you could use contractions like that with common or proper nouns. Oh, am I speaking too fast? Okay, I'm sorry. But to be fair, this is a grammar. This is an advanced. I meant for this to be an advanced grammar lesson. So if you're a beginner or a lower intermediate, you're kind of not going to understand what I'm talking about. But I mean, I could try to speak a little more slowly. I know I do tend to speak a little bit fast and stutter, so sorry about that. But yeah, like, this is meant to be towards the more advanced, or at least upper intermediate. This is meant to be for students of that level. But, you know, I will try to speak a little more slowly. I mean, I could have made that clear from the start, but I forgot to mention it. But that's okay. Okay, so where was I before? Okay. So you got here. Actually, let me keep going. So let's see. What would we have be? Can anyone tell me? Yeah, weave. Exactly, weave. Kind of like weave, like when you weave a basket or stuff like that. But again, different, same pronunciation but different words. That's just English for you. Sadly. And there are times where it's the other way around, where you have the same word but different pronunciations, and it's a mess. But don't worry, like, through with the exposure to English, you'll get through all this eventually. English is not impossible to learn. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's do. So we have. What would this one be? Yeah, they've. Exactly. Good. Okay. And can you, and I'm going to make this, let's see. Now, what would, here, let me combine all these together. Let's say, so what would that be? What would all of those combined with this verb be? Yeah, exactly. You just add an apostrophe s at the end. So just tack it on to every verb. You could type the contraction itself if you want, or you could type every single I mean the apostrophe s, or you could just type every single word. But you get the idea, yeah. Yeah, or it could be has. It could be is or has. That's a good question. It could be is or has. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Again, you'd have to tell from the context. So it could be, so you could combine those forms with is or has. But so far, to recap, am is just this. Oops. When contracting is, does the S take an S sound or a Z sound? That's a good question, actually. I'm trying to think. I think it takes a Z sound. Or actually, no. I think it depends on the verb. No, I mean the pronoun. It depends on the pronoun because it's is with an S sound, but he's is with a Z sound. So it depends on the word. So there's no straightforward answer to that because it depends on the word itself. It's just something you'll have to remember. Okay, I'm trying to think. Yeah, because for words like it's and that's, it's an S sound, but for words like whose and theirs, it's 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 a Z sound. So again, you just have to remember. Okay, so am is this. R is just to recap what we've learned. Is. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but that's okay. Let's see. And has is. And have is. I think that's what we've covered so far. So that's how you would form the contractions. You just attach that to the end of the pronoun you want to make a contraction with. And I think oh, right, I forgot will. Oops. There. Okay. That should cover what we've done so far. So if the contraction is preceded by a vowel, it's voiced, right? That's... man, I don't... See, the problem is that I don't know a lot about pronunciation. There are others who know more about that than I do, but I think that's a good rule. I'm trying to see if that's consistent, because I've never really thought about that up until now. No, I'm and I am are the same thing. Okay, and someone else just asked a really good question, but I'll get to that in a moment. I'm trying to think about what the mechanic said. Okay, so I think he's right. Like, I'm trying to think. So, yeah, I think if the contraction is preceded by a vowel, then yeah, I think you would have to voice it, like z instead of s. But if not, like if it's a consonant sound, like a consonant before the contraction, such as that's or it's, I think it would just be a s sound instead of a z sound. That's actually a good question though. I have to check more. I'll have to look into that a bit. But so far, I think that rule works because I never really thought about that up until now. Okay, so I'm and I am have a difference. No, they're the same thing. But I am needs to be, it's two separate words, so you need to separate them with the space. Okay, in a polite conversation, it should be, can a contraction be seen as something impolite? For example, during an interview. No, like in an interview, no, it doesn't really matter. An interview isn't that formal. I don't think so. No, like I don't think there'd be any problems with contractions in an interview, but in a technical report or in an academic essay, no, don't do that. Okay, but that's actually a good question, and it goes back to what I said earlier. An interview is, I mean, in an interview, things are more formal than casual, but not to the point where you'd have to avoid using contractions, because again, you'd sound stilted. But that is a good question. Okay, let's go back to what I was talking about. Okay, so far we've covered the contractions I mentioned earlier. Now let's cover ones with would and had. Okay. And then we'll cover the negative contractions. And then we'll cover more contractions after that. And I'll cover those, those non-standard contractions later. Yeah, exactly. In speech, it's natural to use them regardless of the setting. Like, if you're giving a presentation or an interview, you can use contractions. It's fine. No one's going to care. But in formal writing, yeah, don't do it. Seriously, just don't do it. So yeah, exactly. It's exactly as the mechanic said. Okay. Yeah, because in college they drill that into you, and high school to a lesser extent. So in formal writing, do not use contractions. But in speech, regardless of the setting, you can use it. In an interview, during a presentation, it doesn't matter. And not using it will again make you sound stilted. Okay, but yeah, lots of really good questions here today. Let's go ahead and talk about. Oh, well, before we do that, before we continue, let me stop and see if anyone has any questions. So does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, well, if not, let's go ahead and. I see someone's rejoined. Hopefully his mic is better now. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about would and had. So, would and had the same contraction. Apostrophe D. It's the same contraction. So, what would I would be? I'd. Yeah, exactly. And what would they had be? They'd. Exactly. And I'm not gonna list all of them because you guys get the point. You just add in the apostrophe D. For all the other pronouns, it's the same thing. So like you'd, id, it'd, it's kind of a messy one to pronounce. It'd, like it would or it had. Like it's essentially kind of like two D sounds. So it had, it'd, it would, it'd, So, but anyway, it's the same. The point is that the apostrophe D applies to all the other pronouns we've covered. Okay, but going back to what I said earlier, would and had have the same contraction. So, did someone have a question? Okay, well, if not, then is it really used? Yeah, it's used. People do use it. It's not. I wouldn't say it's used commonly, but not uncommonly either. But you will hear it. You will hear it from time to time. But I think it's not used as much as say he's or their, because it's kind of wonky to pronounce. So, but it is used. That's the point. Yeah, it is used. Okay. Going back to what I said, would and had. So if they have the same contraction, how do you tell the difference? Well, again, you tell from the context. So, for example, it's the same thing with dated. It's essentially two D sounds, sort of. Yeah, it's hard to articulate that consonant cluster. Yeah, itted, thatted, compared to he'd, she'd, I'd. They're much easier to pronounce. But you do hear both. You do hear both. Okay, let's see. So, to tell the difference, oops. Okay, so I'm going to type two sentences. These are both grammatically correct. Can anyone tell me what number 1 and number 2 would be? So, what would number 1 and number 2 be? So, like, what two words would represent the first contraction, and what two words would represent the second contraction? Would, give, had, gone. Yeah, exactly. Number 1 is would, number 2 is had. Yeah, exactly. You both got it. I would give anything to meet my role model. I'd already gone to bed by the time my parents came home. So yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, as you guys said, I mean. So you tell from the context, because would and had are often accompanied by other verbs such as give and gone. So with those, you can usually tell what someone means. So usually you don't need to disambiguate between would and had with the contraction. Okay. That's actually a good question. Another good question. Um, yeah, you could. Yeah, how could be how would or how did. So, in one instance you could say how'd you do, but in another instance you could say how'd that work. Although I guess that could also be how did that work instead of how would that work. But yeah, how could be how would or how did. That's another good question. I didn't even cover how did. Um, yeah, how'd you do this? See, that one's ambiguous because it could be how did you do it or how would you do it. In that case, I think people would just say the would. They would just say would instead of how did. But I mean, yeah, how could be either one. That one's kind of ambiguous. But if you have context, you can tell. But if not, then if all else fails, just don't use the contraction. If you can't tell the difference between how did and how would or any other similar pair of words with a contraction, just don't use a contraction. Better to be safe than sorry. Just don't use a contraction. But yeah, how'd could be how would or how did. Like, oh yeah, like you could also say how'd she be able to do that instead of how would she be able to do that. So how'd could be, in that case it's obvious that how'd is how would. But yeah, sometimes it is ambiguous as to which one you should use. I mean, as to which one it means. But that's what context is for. And if context doesn't help, then just don't use a contraction. Yeah, exactly. Like, and see, regarding what I, and this brings me to another point. Yeah, to avoid ambiguity, just pronounce it or write the contraction out fully. Don't even bother using the contraction. Better to be safe than sorry. So like for example, you know that I'd is equal to or I'm sorry, not equal. Let's just say I'd represents I would or I had. For now, let's work with I had. Let's work, with I had. For now, let's work with I had. So, okay, so let's say this. So the problem with the contraction such as I'd is that, okay, so we have two clauses here. If I'd started earlier on the assignment and if I started earlier on the assignment. The problem, however, is that sometimes you may not hear that D in the contraction I'd. So even though somebody meant to say if I had started, it sounds as though they're saying if I started. If that makes sense. So sometimes that D in the contraction can be hard to hear. So again, to avoid ambiguity in that case, just write out the contraction fully. I mean, not, I mean to, write it out as two different words. That's what I mean. Sorry. I'm just stuttering all over the place. But, so instead of saying I'd, you could just say I had, which is what I do. I always say I had. And I never really say I'd. I just say I had because sometimes that D can be hard to hear. So it should be, so, in that case, you should just say the whole thing. So if I had started earlier on the assignment, and then, it's not as confusing that way. Now, there are some exceptions. So in this case, if you have if I'd given that to you sooner, well, obviously it's going to be I'd, because had is the only thing that makes sense there. So if I had given that to you sooner, in that case, it's not a problem to use I'd. But the problem is that in English, verbs are either regular or irregular. But with the irregulars, it's obvious when somebody means to say I'd. But with the regulars, it's not as obvious, because started is both the past simple and past participle of start. So in that case, you'd have problems. But in the other case, given is different from gave or give. So you can't confuse those two. So to reiterate, just write or say the contraction. Just write the contraction out, or say the full version to avoid ambiguity. So just do as the mechanic said. Just, if all else fails, just say the whole thing. Just say the whole thing. Better safe than sorry. Okay, and let me edit that a bit. Okay, so in the first example, the D can be hard to hear, but in the second one, it's pretty obviously there. Because as I said, started is the same for both the past simple and past participle, but gave and given are different. So this case can be ambiguous when it comes to pronunciation. This case is not. But hopefully all that made sense to you. So again, when all else fails, just say the whole thing. It's not going to hurt you. You don't have to use contractions all the time. People don't even use contractions all the time in casual speech. Most of the time, sure, but not all the time. Especially when, using contractions would cause ambiguity. Okay. So, now we've covered those. Now let's cover negated contractions. But before we cover negated contractions, does anyone have any questions so far?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, is it common to use have or has? I'm sorry, is it common to contract have or has when it's not used as a modal verb? Rather, it's used to express possession.
Oh yes, another good question. Yes, thank you. Okay, so it was in my outline, but for some reason I just skipped right over it. Okay, so what he's talking about is this. So sometimes you'll hear people say things like this. You'll hear things like that. I haven't the slightest clue, or something like this. You'll hear something like this. She hasn't the foggiest idea of what's going on, or I haven't the slightest clue. So, this use of have to indicate possession, as the mechanic said, you will hear this occasionally, but it's kind of dialectal, and even then, people don't really talk like this a lot. So, this usage is kind of, well, in some dialects, kind of antiquated. So, you're not going to hear it very often. It's valid, but you're not going to hear it very often. Not even in the dialects that use it. Like, they'll just reserve it for certain circumstances and then just say other things. So, more often you will hear, I don't have the slightest clue, or she doesn't have the foggiest idea of what's going on. So you'll hear more do support, where you use the modal verb do, instead of just using have or has to indicate possession. But that's a good question. But yeah, using have like that isn't wrong, but it's not common. So just keep that in mind. So you want to use do support. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, well, if not, let's talk about negated contractions. So what do I mean by negated contractions? Well, negated contractions are simply contractions with nots in them. So, for example, you could say, for example, you could say, for the verb is combined with not, that would be isn't. So here we have is and nots combined, put into one word, isn't. And then we have are and not, which would be aren't. Yeah, exactly, aren't. Are and not they're just aren't. Okay, now, what about this one? And what about this one? Let me give you 3 to do. And what about, I'm trying to think of others. Yeah, let's do this one. What about these 3? What would those be? Yeah, exactly. You got it, radioactive. Activite. Wasn't, weren't, and won't. So not is just this. It's just N apostrophe T. So you attach that to whatever verb you want. But be careful though, because in most cases you can just attach to the end and not worry about anything. But there are some cases where you'll have to change the spelling of the entire contraction. So for example, I don't want to talk about that one yet. Let me talk about, let's see. Actually, I think that's the only one I think that's actually the only example that I have. So, let's talk about shall and not. What would that be? Can anyone tell me? What would shall and not be? This is a challenging one. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, you got it. Shan't. Not shalln't. Shan't. It's shan't. Yeah, it's shan't. Exactly, it is shan't. So shall plus not would be shan't. I think that might be the only case where the spelling changes entirely. I thought there were more cases, but I guess there aren't, because I can't find any others here. That might be the only case. But anyway, the point is that usually you can just put N apostrophe T at the end of a verb, but here, well, certain verbs I mean, but here it's a completely different word, shan't. Yeah, it's funny, yeah, because it's like, that's not what you were expecting, but that's how you would spell it. So it's shan't. Okay, but you guys get the idea. So what would... Isn't shan't dated? Yes, and I'll talk about it in a moment. I want to save... I'm actually going to talk about dated contractions in a bit. I want to save that for later. But that's not a bad question. That's not a bad question, because, yeah, that's a good question to ask. Okay, so what would this one be? Here, let me give you 3 more to work with. And let me give you this one. Okay. So what would these 3 be? Yep, yeah, you got it. Shouldn't, yeah, shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't. Yeah, you both got it. So, really, again, just add N apostrophe T to the end of the verb. Except in the case of shan't, shall and not, which would become shan't. Okay, and, so on and so forth. Let me go ahead and do this one. So what would this one be? And what would this one be? And let me see if I can... We covered that one, that one, that one, that one. Oh, right, I need to cover that one. And yeah, let me go ahead and cover all the combinations. Okay, so what would these 3 be? Yeah, exactly. Haven't, hasn't, and hadn't. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I see someone else typing up the answer, but I'm pretty sure they already got it. But yeah, it's, haven't, hasn't, hadn't. Yeah, exactly. See, you guys are getting it. Contractions aren't hard. Okay, and let me go ahead and cover... Okay, so... What would... And then the remaining ones I'll just cover. Can anyone tell me what these 3 are? exactly. Don't, doesn't, and didn't. Yeah, exactly. You both got it. Don't, doesn't, and didn't. Good job. Okay. Let's see. I already covered that one. Covered that one. Now let's cover a few more. And for this one, I'll just put two different spellings. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So what would these three be? I was going to cover them, but I think I'll let you guys do it to give you a bit more practice. And yeah, cannot is spelled like two different ways. More often, it's more often it's spelled without a space, but I mean, either one is correct. Okay, yeah, good job, guys. Yeah, exactly. Can't, mightn't, and mustn't. Except that mustn't has to be spelled with, I believe it's spelled with the T, two T's? I don't think it's spelled with one T. But let me make sure. I just want to make sure really fast because I think it's... Let me just make sure. Yeah, it's spelled with two T's. So it's mustn't. Yeah, it's really shan't. No, I think someone did say... Did no one say the answer to that one? Yeah, someone did. He said... Radioactivite said won't. Yeah, he did answer that one. Someone answered it. Yeah. Well, someone did answer what will and not are. And yeah, shall and not is really shan't. It's just one weird contraction, but that's how you would do it. Yeah, mustn't. That's the correct spelling, yes. But yeah, it's mustn't either way, so that's correct. Okay. What was I going to do? Oh wow, we're going at a really good pace here, and it's been 90 minutes. Might finish sooner than expected. Okay, so that would be all the... I think those are all the contractions with not that I can think of. We have isn't, aren't, wasn't, weren't, haven't, hasn't, hadn't, won't, wouldn't, don't, doesn't, didn't, can't, couldn't, shouldn't, mightn't, and mustn't. Although I should point out that mightn't and mustn't aren't commonly used. So, keep that in mind. Some contractions here are valid, but they're just not very commonly used. The more English you listen to, the better you'll get at knowing which contractions to use and which ones to just avoid using altogether, or to at least not use much of. Anyway, yes, I'm going to get into that. Sir, you just asked a good question, Sergey K. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but yes, that's correct. That's a good question. I mean, I was actually just about to cover that. So for certain verbs, we have a few. Yeah, we have a few special contractions. But before we do that, I'll stop and see if anyone has any questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say someone asks me a yes/no question, and I reply to them with an answer ending with a contraction. I think it's incorrect, right? For example, if they ask me, are you from, for example, are you American? And I say, yes, I am, right? It's assuming I am American.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say to them, yes, I'm, it's incorrect, right? It should be, yes, I am.
Oh, yes. Yet another good question. Okay, that's another good question I did not I forgot to, I didn't think of bringing up. So, what he's talking about is this, where essentially if you can have just contractions for, if you can end the sentence in a contraction, like in just one word, sentences with one word that are contractions. So, for example, let me use the example he talked about. Okay, so, oops. Okay, so the example he used was this: Are you American? Yes, I am. Are you American? Yes, I'm. Do not do the second one. It is not standard English. You can't use contractions like that. It's just one of those instances where you can't. There are times where you can use contractions, like that, and just where you just have one word that's a contraction, but there are other instances where you can't, and this is just one of them. So you could say something like, instead of saying, I'm trying to think. Okay, so instead of saying, well, first let me show another example where that doesn't work. So, say is, let's use this example. Okay. So here's another example. Is he a student at this school? Yes, he is. Is he a student at this school? I should put at this school. But anyway, to keep it consistent. Okay. Is he a student at this school? Yes, he's. Again, you can't do that. We don't use contractions like that. So, that was a good question he asked. We don't use contractions like that. You have to write out the whole thing if you're giving answers like that. Now, with negative answers, okay, so with negative answers, it's different. So, yeah, with negative answers, you technically can. So you could say something like, you could say something like this: Is she married? No, she isn't. So in that case, you can use a contraction like that. You can have the contraction end the sentence like that. Is she married? No, she isn't. Or no, she's not even. So you could also say no, she's not. But in that case, you're not ending the sentence with the contraction. But the point is that with negative answers, it's different. Or you could even say something like, and here, this is a bit of a humorous example. I'll cook dinner tonight. Don't. You'll just burn the whole thing. In this case, you can just say don't instead of do not. And that's fine too. So in cases like this, it's fine to have contractions as the only, and either ending the sentence or just being the only word in the sentence. So, in that case, you could do that. Or, instead of just saying let us, you could just say let's. And I didn't cover that one for some reason. So you could say, want to go to the movies? And then you could say, yes, let's. In that case, that's also another instance where you can have a contraction used like that. But in many cases, you can't really use contractions such as, ones with is and have and similar verbs. You can't use them like that. So you can't say yes, he's, yes, I'm, yes, she, yes, you've, or anything like that. Just, no, you can't do that. It really depends on the contraction. Some contractions um, can be used a bit differently from others. It's just something you have to get a feel for. Although that is still a very good question, because that's something I've always wondered as a native. It's like, why can we use contractions here but not here? It's just the way the language works. Okay. But anyway, if no one has any more questions, let's go on to our last contractions. Oh, actually, we're going to talk about more contractions after this, but they're they're non-standard contractions. I'll call them that. But first, let's talk about the ones with have, the modal verbs with have. That's actually another good question. I'll get to that in a moment too. Don't worry. Just hold on to that question, because I'm going to talk about some antiquated contractions later, and we'll get to that point. So just hold on to your question. Okay, but first let's talk about contractions with modal verbs and the verb have. So let's say would, could, should, must, and might. If you combine these with have, can anyone tell me what you would get? Yeah, exactly. You just added apostrophe VE at the end. So you could say, and as someone else typed out, you could say would've, could've, should've, must've, and might've. So yeah, exactly. That's how you do it. It's really easy. And I think we've covered pretty much every standard contraction I could think of. There might be more, but I did say I wasn't going to try to cover every single possible one. But according to this list, I think I've covered most of them. And oh, I didn't there are a few I actually did not cover. Okay, but that's okay. Let's see. Yeah, but I did cover most of them. But anyway, now let's go ahead and talk about the some really fancy contractions here. So the negative form of the last ones. Okay, so with the negative form of the last ones, you don't use a contraction at all. It's just, you just separate the two words and put a not in between. So for example, it would be would not have, could not have, and should not. Well, that contraction is possible, but it's not standard. It's really colloquial. So you don't, if like that's just not something that's standard. But that is a good question. Yeah, that's what we call a double contraction. Yeah. But oops, and I forgot to put in the last one. Might not have. But yeah, you do hear things like that, or you'll hear stuff like let me show you another one. Like, see, here's an example of a double contraction. If I had known that, I'd have done it sooner. So you have I'd, and like I, would, and have just smashed into one word. So you get I'd have. And some people will say it like that. So yeah, those double contractions do exist, but they're not really standard, I should say. They're not wrong, they're just not standard. So it's not something that you're going to hear very often. It's very colloquial. Okay. And someone just answered the question that someone asked, which is cool. That's great. Um, yeah, so in those cases where you have, and I was going to cover those in a moment, but since someone brought it up, if you have the A at the end of, would, could, should, must, and might, and you wouldn't really use the apostrophe there, that you don't need the apostrophe there, then it's just a shortening of would have. Which actually reminds me of another important topic, but I'm actually, let me go ahead and talk about that now. So, and this is another issue that happens when you don't really read a lot. This is not the same thing as this. Or actually, let me edit that a bit. It should be would've. Would've is not would've. It's not. They're not the same thing. Would've is not even an actual thing people would say. It's not would've. It's would've, which stands for would have. But the problem is that the "of" of would've sounds like the of would've. I mean, I personally pronounce them a bit differently, but some people pronounce them the same. So, for some people, would've sounds like would've. Some people pronounce it like that. Would've. I would've done it. But no, it's not would've. It's would have or would've. Would've is not standard English, and it's not something you should ever say. And if you ever make that mistake in a writing assignment, yeah, it does not reflect very well on you. But anyway, yeah, many natives make that mistake. Yeah, that's right, they do. And it just comes down to not reading enough. That's usually what it is. If you read a lot, then you're going to see that these are two very different words, or very different groups of words. Whatever applies. Okay, but anyway, let's talk about some other contractions. Let's talk about, here, let me list them all first, and then we'll cover them. So we have, I already covered shan't. So we have these four, right? We have needn't, ain't, twas, and tis. So what does needn't stand for? Need not. So needn't is simply need not. You needn't worry about me. That's how you... It's a bit dated to use needn't, so don't use it a lot, but occasionally you will hear it used if somebody wants to sound fancy or poetic or something like that, but normally we don't use needn't. It was more common back then, but it's not common now. So you could say, you needn't worry about me, which is, you need not worry about me, which is kind of similar to, and it's really just the same with this sentence, but with the to removed. So it's kind of like that. You needn't to worry about me, or you need not to worry about me. So you could say you needn't worry about me, or you needn't to worry about me. The second one sounds less, weird than the first, but you can say either one. And need is like this because here it's functioning more as a modal verb, if that makes sense, than an actual, standalone verb, because you can say he needn't worry about me, or she needn't worry about me. But if you don't want to say that, just use the verb do. She doesn't need to worry about me. He doesn't need to worry about me. I don't need to worry about you. Stuff like that. Okay, now let's cover ain't, as you all have been saying. Ain't. Ain't, which is pretty much just am not or are not, depending on the person. I ain't doing that. He ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. Ain't doesn't, it's not conjugated for person, so it's just ain't. I ain't, you ain't, he ain't, she ain't. But ain't is very colloquial, so don't ever use it in formal settings. Just don't. But among your friends, it's fine. No one cares. Or your family. But in formal settings, do not use it. Just don't. What else was I? Oh yeah, there's also, what is it? I forgot. There was one more. Oh yeah, twas. Now this one you'll hear in like stuff like Christmas songs or Christmas stories or stuff like that. Twas, which is basically it was. Twas the night before Christmas. Twas a dark and stormy night. And stuff like that. Here, let me actually type that out. You know, you've probably heard these. Twas the night before Christmas. Twas a dark and stormy night. You've probably heard stuff like that. But yeah, twas is just an antiquated way of saying it was. And it's the same thing with tis. Tis. You know, such as like in that Christmas song. Sorry, Christmas song. Tis the season to be jolly. Tis. You know, tis is it is. Tis the season to be jolly. So twas and tis are similar. The only difference is just the tense. And as the mechanic pointed out, ain'ts could also mean do not and does not. So you could say I ain't got no money or I ain't got any money. You could use a double negative like that too. It's not standard, but it's not, but you know, again, it's just the difference between casual speech and standard speech. But in certain dialects, ain't is used all the time, and it's valid. It's because we're not talking about what's right and wrong. We're talking about what's standard and non-standard. That's what we should be talking about. So, yeah. Yeah, well, ain'ts could be haven't or don't or anything like that. So you could say, I'm sorry. So some people could say, I haven't got any money, which is valid, or, which is standard, I should say, not valid, standard. And you have other people who could say, I don't got any money, or I don't got no money, which isn't standard, but, it's valid nonetheless. So, so here we're talking about, see, it's really just a dialectal thing. And what do I mean by, I've been saying standard English. What do I mean by standard English? Standard English is just English in its most widely accepted form. Meaning that, a variety of English that everyone can agree on. Like, that everyone can use, everyone can agree on. Just no arguments there. So if ain't isn't standard English, but in some dialects it is perfectly fine to use. So it's not a matter of right and wrong, it's a matter of standard and non-standard. But, again, I don't, it's not that I'm saying you can't use ain't. You can use ain't. It's perfectly fine. Just be careful with how you use it. There are times where you should use it and times where you just shouldn't. And plus, if you use it, you sound native, provided that you use it correctly. And yeah, that's the thing. Like, what may be proper English then is not may not be proper English now. Standards change over time. That's just how things are. So even standard English alone isn't absolute. It changes. But yeah, a lot of really good points here made by some people. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about the really weird contractions, like the really, really weird one. The really weird ones. Oh, but before we do that, the mechanic brought up an interesting question. Is it just me, or do not is more emphatic than don't, particularly in commands? Yeah, that's something I should also talk about. When you use not, okay, so remember how I said earlier that you should use contractions as much as possible in casual speech? Because, not using them at all will make you sound really stilted and formal. Well, there are times where using them there are times where not using them would be better than using them. Like, for example, the mechanic said, to him, do not sounds more emphatic than don't. Yeah, that's right. So, if you want to emphasize a command or something, you wouldn't use a contraction. You would just say the whole thing. So you could say, do not turn the TV on. Do not go to the movies with your friends. In this case, it's perfectly fine and even necessary not to use contractions, because you're emphasizing the command or whatever it is you're emphasizing. And yeah, it can make you sound angry in certain contexts, or at most stern. It depends. So yeah, if you want to emphasize an action or a state or whatever, it would be better not to use a contraction, and a contraction, I mean, and to just write out the whole thing. Or like in some instances where you could say, he is not my friend. That's more emphatic than saying, he's not my friend, or he isn't my friend. If you want to emphasize that he's not your friend, just do not use a contraction. Just say the whole thing. He is not my friend. So in cases like that, separating the not, will make your sentences sound stronger. But again, be careful with how you do this, because tone is very important when it comes to communication. So if you don't watch your tone, you might accidentally come off the wrong way. But in any case, that's one way of not using. That's one acceptable way of not using contractions. Because there are times where using them would not be as strong as not using them. He is sounds more official, and in certain contexts, yes, but in this context, it's a different use of he is. He is not my friend. And there are times where you could use either the contraction or the full form, and it will sound strong either way. But more often than not, not using contraction will make your sentence sound more emphatic. Don't turn the TV on. Do not turn the TV on. Just depends on the tone, really. Okay. A lot of really good questions today. I'm glad you guys brought up, because I would not have brought them. I would not have brought up those topics otherwise. Okay. Okay. So before we continue, does anyone have any questions so far? Because now we're going to go into the really funky contractions. Well, no, that's LMAO, and things like LMAO, WTF, stuff like that. Those are what we call, I guess, I would say
acronyms.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You got it. That's exactly what they are, acronyms. Where you just you just take the first letter of every word in a phrase or whatever, and then just put them together. So, what the fuck would be WTF. WTH would be what the hell. LMAO would be laughing my ass off. Or for some people who prefer the, slightly more euphemistic version, LMBO, which would be laugh my butt off, and so on and so forth. And ROFL, or ROFL, which would be rolling on the floor and laughing. It's stuff like that. It's really just a lot of slang.
I find in British English we tend to use more acronyms than American English.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, for example, these here. That means no worries, mate.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah, you're right, that's a good point. Especially the mate, M and 8, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, we find it quite patronising when Americans and Canadians tend to use mate, because it's only really in the other Commonwealth countries that mate is generally acceptable, because the way they say it, they change the vowel, that the A sounds different, and they say the T when the T is supposed to be glottalized, and so it feels a bit patronising. It's like when in in British English we tend to say cheers more than thank you or thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And when Americans say it, they say the R. They say the R.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just sounds a bit unusual. Do you know what I mean? You catch my drift?
Yeah, I get what you mean because that's the thing about British English. Like with the R's and T's, you guys pronounce them a bit differently from us. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so instead of saying cheers, we say cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, exactly.
And instead of saying mate, we say mate, like without the sound. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's like I personally don't like doing that either because I suck with accents anyway, so I just prefer to just not say things like mate or cheers. I just stick to whatever's in my dialect.
Yeah, what you know.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, another good observation. Okay. What was I? Oh yeah, right.
Do I say YouTube?
Huh?
Oh yeah, I do say YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah, another funky thing about our pronunciation differences.
Yeah.
Okay, what was that? Oh yeah, right. Now we're going to go into the really funky contractions, such as, let's say, gonna, coulda, woulda, mighta, stuff like that. Where basically people just get really lazy and then just smash the words together to get some really interesting contractions. So in the case of gonna is like it's going to. So when you say I'm gonna go to the beach, you really mean to say I'm going to go to the beach. So that's one use of gonna. And some people even shorten it further. So instead of saying gonna, they just say gon. I'm gonna go to the beach. Like they'll sometimes shorten it further to that.
I've seen that a lot of Americans like. I saw this sentence in a Tom Scott video the other day, called "The Most Common Vowel in English," and he said that Americans will shorten "I'm going to go to the store" to "I'ma."
Oh, that
I'm a go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, or they'll just say "I'ma go to the store."
Yeah. Whereas I would say I'm going to go to the store.
Yeah, a lot of us really do that. Especially over here in the South, you'll hear that a lot. And I live in the South. I live in Texas, so you will hear that a lot over here.
Well, I'ma.
Yeah, I'ma go. I'ma do it. Or all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
In my dialect, that just sounds really unusual.
Yeah, it does. That's the weird thing about language. Like a lot of people speak a common language, but use it in different ways. And when you look at other dialects, it's like, what? Why are they saying it like that?
Yeah, exactly.
So to repeat what Water just said, some people will say "I'ma," or in some cases like fixing. So fixing to. So they'll say "I'm finna."
You what?
I'm finna do it. That's how they say it. They shorten fixing to, so fixing to becomes finna.
I've never heard that. That's so absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, severe Russian.
Yeah, that's a funny picture. It's true. It's like I'm finna, or simply I finna. I finna do it. I finna do it. I'm finna do it. Instead of, or some people just say I'm fixing to do it, or even I'm fixin' without the G. I'm fixin' to do it. So, yeah, American English is kind of weird in that regard. I'm fixing to do it.
Is that only found in southern varieties of American English?
Yeah, you're not going to hear it very much in the northern varieties.
Yeah, because I've never heard that before. Bro, that's blown my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, yeah. And as I was saying, it's like, let's see, hold on. Let me show you how. So, if for those of you who don't know, I'm fixing to do it is essentially the same thing as saying I'm about to do it or I'm going to do it. So that's what fixing means in that case. But see, you can just shorten it repeatedly. I'm fixing to do it, I'm fixing to do it, I'm finna do it, and I finna do it. So you could just keep shortening it like that until you get to the final form. Yeah, that's what we call like African American vernacular English. They do this a lot. They don't conjugate their verbs for person, and they say things like
Are you
finna.
are you a native AAVE speaker?
No.
I was
No.
gonna say
Yeah, like
that would be sick, man.
yeah, because like, see, I'm a black person, but my parents are from West Africa, Nigeria, so they don't speak that dialect.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so that's why.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I can understand what the dialect. I just don't speak like that at all. My
Yeah,
brother.
because I've tried listening to it and it's fucking impossible. I can't understand any.
Yeah, it's just. Yeah, it's just there's just some dialects that even we native speakers just have a hard time understanding, and we're just like, what? And it doesn't
Yeah.
help that, yeah, the accents change too, so that further complicates things.
Yeah, Bath and Bath.
Yeah. Which is why, if you're learning a different language, I recommend sticking to one dialect. At least, yeah, so that you don't get a mismatch of dialects which won't sound right to anyone. Just stick with one dialect.
British.
I actually like the accent of British English. I like how they pronounce things. It sounds so nice.
Yay, validation. Oi, bruv. This geezer knows.
Yeah. There was also something that. Oh yeah, there are also other contractions such as the mechanic brought this up. So, don't know, kinda, sorta, other stuff like that. So, instead of saying I don't know, people will just say I don't know. I don't know. So I don't know becomes I don't know. Or even I don't know. Like they just take out the D. So it's like so they further reduce it to that. And occasionally I even say that. I don't know. Instead of saying I don't know, they just say I don't know or even I don't know. I don't know. So that's another one. And there's also kinda, instead of kinda is just kind of, but shortened, so it's kinda small, instead of it's kind of small, so it's kinda small. And then, sorta is really the same thing as, it's the same thing as kinda. Sorta, kinda. Okay, I know if people are asking some questions here. Yeah, finna is fixing too. Yeah, for some people that will blow your mind, but yeah, that's how some people say it. Now with me, it's not that because I live here, so of course it's not going to sound that weird to me. It still sounds a bit weird, but I've lived with that dialect. I don't speak it, but I understand it. So, yeah. No, that's dead ass is like an adjective where made of two different words. It's not a contraction. Okay, let's see. I know the people have been asking a lot of questions. I'm trying to, like, go back and see. Oh yeah, whatcha. Yeah, that's another one Mechanic brought up. Whatcha. So, whatcha is, what are you? So, what you doing? What you doing? Or what you doing? Or even wanna. That's another one. That's a good one. Wanna is want to. I wanna. Do you wanna? I wanna. We wanna. I wanna, you wanna, he wanna. You don't conjugate for person. She wanna do it. Well, actually, that last one is kind of... That one's more AAVE than, but still. In other cases, yeah, wanna would just sound fine. I want to do it. He wants to do it. Like, in some... Yeah, like...
You want to go?
yeah, I want to go. Let's go. We want to go.
Oh. Alright.
Okay,
I have just came, but should we say do you wanna or you wanna when we are asking questions?
You can kind of omit the don't, like, do you wanna? You can just say you wanna.
Yeah, that's a good
one.
Alright.
At least in my dialect.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. Like, sometimes people just drop the verb do, so they just say wanna. You wanna go? You wanna come? Instead of just
like do you want? Like, do you want to drink? Do you want to drink?
Yeah, exactly. So you could... Hey, let me type it down. So you could say you want to go instead of do you want to go. So dropping.
You want to be
do.
careful.
Huh?
You want to be careful about using that sentence though. You want to go or do you want to go? Because it has a connotation of, do you want to fight me? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in case you're unaware of that. You want to go, bruv? This geezer with all of this fucking British English, man.
Yeah, but that's a really good point though. Yeah, be careful with how you use drop the do, because in this case, you want to go can sound like, you're starting a fight. So be careful about that. So, and of course the tone matters too. So again, just be careful with how you say these things.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of really good examples here. I'm trying to think of... Oh, there are also more. Yeah, Water typed up some more. So we have "ite," as in...
We would just say "I."
Yeah.
Yeah.
"Ite," as in alright. "Ite." It's "ite."
Yeah.
"Ite." And of course, "lotta" is "lot of."
Yeah, lotta, don'tcha, betcha, lemme, letcha, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just go ahead and type up the rest of the ones you had. Yeah. So Water provided a lot of examples. Betcha, let me instead of lemmy, betcha instead of bet you, letcha instead of let you, come on instead of come on, so on and so forth. Yeah, and sometimes "ite" is just simplified to, "ite." Like, you don't need... Not... The A isn't even there. It's just "ite." So, yeah. A lot of really good examples of these contractions. And another thing I hear is... So, like, you could say, instead of what did you do?
Could I say David? David? You what?
Okay, so another one here is like ja. So, and let me type it out. So what did you do? What'd you do? What'd you do? So did you becomes ja. What'd you do? So that's another one. And there are a lot. We see as native speakers, we tend to just shorten a lot of our words because it's just easier for us to speak that way. So we get these crazy combinations. It's the same in pretty much any language. Like I can think of contractions in Spanish as well as contractions in German. Like so, it's really in pretty much every language. Okay. And as Water said earlier, and come on can be spelled with either the apostrophe or without the apostrophe. So come on. So come on is just come on. So come on. Come on. Instead of come on. So yeah, lots of weird contractions you could make. So I hope you all learned a lot of slang words today because we had quite a bit. Okay. Okay. Can you repeat what you do? Well, what you do is what did you do? So, did you can be shortened to ja. So, what did you do can sometimes be said as what'd you do? What'd you do? Yeah, no problem. Okay, I think I've covered that. We covered a lot of those informal contractions, but I can't think of any others to cover. I think I've covered just about. What the kind of a contraction is that? Whom's the ain't it's I can't even read that. Anyway. Oh, and here's some other ones. Um Sometimes and I'm looking at a list right here. Sometimes and is shortened to just an N. Just an N. So like you could say I'm trying to think of an example. So pizza and chicken, like that. Food and drink, that too. So and can sometimes be shortened to N. Food and drink, pizza and chicken, me and my friends, all that stuff. And yeah, with texting, you're gonna see quite a bit of these. Okay. Okay, and there are also some. I got you. Oh, okay, yeah, I got you. Got you. So yeah, that's another one. Got you. I got you. No, don't use any of these in formal text. Just don't. No. Very big no-no. Don't do it. Seriously, just don't do it. That would be a big oof. Don't do it. Ever. But yeah, I got you is just, I got you. Like chew. I got you. Instead of I got you, it's just, I got you. What's the meaning of oof? Well, it's when you make like a really like a really big oops, like a big mistake, or like something really bad happens to you. It's like it comes from a game of Roblox. People use it to mean like, well, man, some shit just happened to you, stuff like that. That's pretty much what oof refers to. Just you have to look up the meme to um, understand it more, but that's what people mean when they say oof. Okay. Um, yeah, that's also another good one. Day and night, and sometimes people shorten nights to nights. So yeah, a lot of good ones here. And there's also, and here's some going back to what I said earlier regarding the um Oh, gotta. Yeah, gotta's a good one. Unless you actually mean that you have to leave, then, well, nice having you. But yeah, gotta refers to got to. I gotta go. He gotta go. We gotta go. And let's see. There's also. I want to see if I can try to cover. I've covered most of these in the list. Okay, let me see if I can do this. So, oh yeah, and there's also in it. In it instead of isn't it, you have in it.
No, it's in it.
Oh yeah, in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that in some like for over here, sometimes I hear like people stretching out the end sound, but yeah, but for others it's just in it. But yeah, in it or in it, isn't it?
It's only really used in these dialects,
Yeah.
to be honest. If you defy those conventions, then you're looked at as a bit of a gimp.
True. Or some people like, and this is in the South, like in the South, like some people pronounce in it as in it, like it, like they like as if the S was there, but it's not, so they just stretch out the N, or they could just say, or they say something like this instead of this, like wasn't it instead of wasn't it, wasn't it nice?
I'm not reading what Roblox is fucking.
I can't read that either.
The thing is, in my dialect, I would never speak like that. So if I read like that, it's just really cringe.
Yeah.
I reckon Roblox is secretly a native.
Probably.
Yeah, it's just taking the piss, to be honest.
Yeah. But God, it's like a different language. I can't. What?
It's mixed with multicultural London English with patois,
Yeah.
which is a dialect spoken in Jamaica, which is a combination of French Creole with English Creole.
Oh yes, yeah, that is true. Yeah, there's that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my country, Nigeria, there's something called Pidgin English, where it's like.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen it. Yeah,
yeah.
You guys do th fronting,
Yeah.
so free would become tree.
Yeah.
Hey guys, is there a course or something?
Yes. This is an English class on contractions.
Okay then.
But yeah, but the point is here that there are just many dialects, and they all have their own quirky contractions and stuff.
Okay guys, enjoy it.
Huh?
I have to go.
Oh.
Enjoy it. I have to
okay.
go.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for coming, and see you later.
See you, bro.
Okay. Let me cover. Okay, there are a few more I want to cover, and then we'll stop the lesson. Let's see. So there's ne'er, which is never, and this is antiquated, by the way, and or with over, air with ever, and ol for old. So I want to cover those really fast. So, and with the exception of the last one, these first three are pretty antiquated. You're not going to hear people say the first three very much, but you may occasionally hear, like, some people will say ne'er-do-wells, as in people who are troublemakers, or you'll hear in some songs, o'er the hill, or, like, yeah, it's just stuff like that. But just to show you, and air is just ever. I can't remember, I'm trying to think of an example of that one, but it is one of those old-fashioned contractions. And of course, ol is just old, but with the D dropped. He's an old friend of mine, instead of he's an old friend of mine. Okay. I think that's all the contractions. Well, there's There actually, I forgot to mention one. Oh no, two actually. But other than that, I think I actually did cover all of these. So there are two more I'm going to cover and then we're done. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. There'd is, there would, and there had, and I forgot to mention that one. And there'll is, there will, or there shall. So those two I forgot to mention. And there, I already covered those. Okay, there are two more here. Two more here. Okay, where? It was just right here. Oh yeah, I know what they are. Okay, so, and of course there's also, oops. So there's also oughtn't, which is ought not. I oughtn't do that. He oughtn't do that. Like, it's just oughtn't, but like ought not is just oughtn't. Like, it's just the same as the other modal verbs where you just put an N apostrophe T at the end. I forgot to mention that one. No, people never say it would be, people never say it would be like a contraction of people would never say it. It's the would. It's would,
Yeah.
not had.
Yeah. People would never say it, yeah.
Yeah. And again, you tell from the context of which one is which. And if you have two verbs like would and say, or had and said, or something like that, the context, those verbs will usually make it pretty obvious as to which verb you're using, would or had. Okay, and there's one last one, and you're going to hear this one quite a bit. Ma'am. Ma'am. Which is short for madam, or madame, or whatever. Ma'am.
Bro, you never hear that in the UK. That's so weird.
Yeah, like you won't hear that over there, but in the here you will hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, you never hear that. You only hear like Miss or Ms, which is now becoming more common.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that's really, this one's really more of a southern thing.
Yeah, I was talking to a fella from fucking Georgia, and he said that they always say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. Yeah.
Can
Whereas-
I ask questions about this?
Yeah, it's also the north too, but oh yeah, go ahead.
When we are in military, we say sir to our commanders, right? But if they are girl, we say ma'am. Do we say ma'am? Or sir?
Oh, sorry, hold on. Yes. Yeah. Yes. What is it? Where are you? Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay. It depends really. Like, over here I would definitely say ma'am. Like, to any stranger I would just say ma'am. Hi, ma'am, or anything like that. It depends on the dialect. And as someone else said, it's in the north too, but it's in the north too, yeah. So it's not really just in the south.
So for military, do we still say ma'am to our commanders or just sir?
Well, it depends on. Well, in that instance, you would like if you have a female commander, you would just say ma'am, and with the male commander, you would just say sir. I don't think it's really.
All right.
Yeah.
Because I see this in movies.
Oh, okay.
I never heard ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Uh huh. But yeah. Anyway, I think those are all of the contractions I can think of. Ma'am is formal or informal. Like it really does. Well, I mean, you wouldn't use it in formal matters, but well, I don't know. It just depends. But basically, you use ma'am with strangers, and if it's people you know, then you wouldn't. You would just say if it's like your teacher or something, you would just say Miss whatever, or if it's a friend, you just say their name. But yeah, good questions. See, the thing is that I thought that man was kind of more of a southern thing, but because it just I don't know, it just sounds that way to me. But yeah, it is used in both the north and the south. It's used all over, not just in the south. I wasn't trying to imply that it was used just in the south. But anyway, yeah, a lot of really good questions here and answers, especially coming from the mechanic and water and Roblox customer support and anyone else who provided some good insights. Okay, but yeah, in any case, I'd say that is the end of this lesson. I think I've covered pretty much every contraction there is, and if not, then you can just come across those on your own time. But anyway, hopefully you guys all learned something from this. But that's really the end of the lesson. So if no one has any more questions, I will stop recording. Does anyone have any questions before I stop recording anyway? Okay.
I'm sorry, but are we allowed to speak? I didn't know this.
No, you're allowed to speak, but only when you're asking questions or providing something that everyone should know.
I see.
Yeah, so only when you have something important to say. That's when you speak. Okay, and I say this because this is a class, and it's not like a hangout where everyone can talk at this, about the same time. But it's just no. Here, only the teacher should be talking. The students should talk only when they have questions, or they're answering questions, or if they have something important to say. But that's the end of the lesson, so let me go ahead and stop recording.